At play. When kids had free time to meet friends, play games, or just hang out, they took to the streets. Irving Howe has recalled, "The streets were ours. Every place else, home, school, shop, belonged to the grown-ups. But the streets belonged to us. We would roam through the city tasting the delights of freedom, discovering possibilities far beyond the reach of our parents. The streets gave us our first clear idea of what life in America was really going to be like." Romping through crowded city streets, kids hitched rides on the back of horse-drawn trolleys, tagged after wandering musicians, and watched cops settle arguments. They listened to fiery soapbox orators and itinerant peddlers of patent medicines that were guaranteed to cure anything. They chased fire trucks, held secret meetings in alleyways, and pitched coins against buildings. Almost any game could be played in the streets. No game was more popular than baseball, America's national pastime. Many immigrant kids became baseball fanatics. A detailed knowledge of baseball heroes and statistics was their badge as true Americans. Where there wasn't enough space for regular baseball games, kids played stickball. The bat, a stick or a broom handle, was used to hit a rubber ball pitched on a bounce. The bases and home plate were marked with chalk on each sidewalk and in the middle of the street. Outfielders were stationed down at the far end of the block. Players spent half their time arguing whether the play had been hampered by passing vehicles and pedestrians. Sophie Risquet has described the different street games played by boys and girls. Children owned the streets in a way unthinkable to city children of today. There were a few parks, but too distant to be of any use, and so the street was the common playground. The separation of boys and girls so rigidly carried out in the public school also held on the street. Boys played with boys, girls with girls. Occasionally, we girls might stand on the sidelines and watch the boys play their games, but our presence was usually ignored. There was no doubt about it, girls were considered inferior creatures. The athletic girl, the girl who would fearlessly decide on a career or even demand the right to study a profession, was still unknown. We girls played only girls' games. Tagging after us sometimes were our little brothers and sisters whom we were supposed to mind, but that was no great hardship. We would toss them our bean bags, little cloth containers filled with cherry pits. Then we would proceed to our game of Potsy. Mama didn't like me to play Potsy. She thought it disgraceful to mark up our sidewalk in chalk, with chalk for our lines in boxes. Besides, hopping on one foot and pushing the thick piece of tin, I managed to wear out a pair of shoes in a few weeks. I obeyed her wishes in my own way by playing further down the street and marking up somebody else's sidewalk. Neither my family nor I played much with dolls. Since families generally had at least one baby on hand, we girls had plenty of opportunity to shower upon the baby brothers or sisters the tenderness and love that would otherwise have been diverted to dolls. Besides, dolls were expensive. One event that attracted boys and girls alike was the appearance of the organ grinder, a wandering street musician who carried a heavy hand organ called a hurdy-gurdy. As the organ grinder turned a crank, his hurdy-gurdy plunked out the cheerful melody of a European folk song. Some organ grinders traveled with the monkey on a leash. The monkey rode on the musician's shoulder, wearing an embroidered coat and a miniature bellhop's cap. When a crowd gathered, the monkey jumped down to the sidewalk, where he collected pennies with one hand while tipping his cap with the other. Another popular figure was the soda vendor. He traveled from street to street with a gleaming metal container strapped to his back, selling sweet, cool soda by the glass. Most of his customers were working adults who would pause for a moment's refreshment. The admiring kids who followed the vendor around could not usually afford to buy his soda. The Iceman also showed up regularly. In the days before modern refrigeration, city families kept perishable foods in the icebox. A big chunk of ice was placed in an insulated compartment at the top of the icebox, while food was stored on the shelves below. When the Iceman came down the street in his horse-drawn wagon, kids were sent by their mothers to meet him. They waited while he used a sharp handsaw to cut a chunk of ice off a huge frozen block. Then a kid would stoop over, grab the cold, slippery chunk with both hands, lift it from the sidewalk, and lug it up 4 or 5 flights of stairs to Mother in the kitchen. On hot summer days, the Iceman was the most popular person around. Kids would crowd around him, begging for cold slivers to suck on or to rub across their sweating faces. Sometimes the sanitation man would show up to turn on water hydrants and flush out the gutters. Then kids could kick off their shoes and dance and shout in the fiercely gushing water. A few children went to summer camp sponsored by the Children's Aid Society and other public service agencies. But most kids spent their summers in the city, working when they had to, playing when they could. For them, a visit to a nearby amusement park was a big event. There was always something to do. An imaginative youngster could simply stand at a window and play tricks on the people down below. Samuel Chotanoff was an immigrant boy who grew up in a tenement apartment overlooking the big fountain in Rutgers Square, a busy New York City intersection. Standing unobserved at one's window, one could focus a burning glass on the face of a person resting on the stone bench of the fountain and relish his annoyance and anger as he tried helplessly to locate his tormentor. From the same vantage point, one could let down a weight attached to a long string, conk the head of a passerby, and draw up the missile before the victim could look around for the offender. Or with the aid of an accomplice stationed at the curb, stretch a string head high across the sidewalk, which, unseen by some unsuspecting pedestrian, would lift his straw hat or derby from his head and send it rolling down the street. Immigrant kids who played street games at the turn of the century grew up to take their places in the daily life of America. They were the first generation in their families to feel truly at home in this country. Today, they are old people, those of them who are still alive. They are the great-grandparents of millions of American boys and girls growing up today. Immigrants still come to America. Since World War II, more than 8 million immigrants have entered the country. While this is a small number compared to the mass migrations at the turn of the century, the United States continues to admit more immigrants than any other nation. Most of today's immigrants come from countries within the Western Hemisphere and from Asia and Africa as well as Europe. When they reach the United States, they face many of the same problems and hardships that have always confronted newcomers. And they come here for the same reason that immigrants have always come, to seek a better life for themselves and their children.